We are now in the flow of presentations already, so you are familiar with the rules here. Just use our chat forum or raise your hand in case you would like to contribute. The main speaker, of course, is David Gertin. I'm so happy that you join us today and present some of your ideas. You are a titan of the field of knowledge management for many years now. And I really appreciate that you spend the time with us today in the afternoon and share some of your insight. I think you are most best known for your knowledge cafe. This has a huge tradition in our little German-speaking community, Society for Knowledge Management, and we really apply parts of your ideas. But probably it would be a good time to learn from the master of the methodology and learn from your insight and what you had in mind actually when you were talking about knowledge conversation. We already had a few conversations, so I would like to give you the floor and thank you so much for sharing your insight and time with us today.
Okay, big thank you, Manfred, and it's absolutely delightful to be here. I only wish this was running face to face and I could be there in person, but so be it. Let's fire up my presentation here. I don't know how to do this. There we go.
By the way, we are closing to 25 in the audience right now, so numbers are growing. Yeah, so
okay, good.
Yeah. And we will have it dynamically today. So yeah.
So I'm just having a problem here. I can't see my slides. Just one moment. Okay. Just bear with me. Just
we have all the time.
A minor glitch on my part here. Let's do something here. How do I? Right. Let's try this again, shall we? Get this right. Okay. There we go. Include system audio. Start my slides. Okay. Is everybody happy? Can everyone see that? You looking good, Manfred?
It's looking
good. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Right. So in the next 30 minutes, what I'd like to do is just introduce you to this concept of conversational leadership, and I'll tell you a little bit about how this came about and go into a little bit of detail. So for those of you who are not familiar with me, I've been working in this knowledge management field for more years than I really care to remember. I think it's more like 30 years than 25, right from the very early days. As Manfred just said, what I'm probably best known for are my knowledge cafes. I started them in London in September 2002. Yeah, that's right. So it's more like 18 years than 15. Run them all over the world. Got to learn a lot about people, a lot about culture, and in particular, a lot about, what I consider now to be the extraordinary power of conversation. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I started to research and, originally to write about the Knowledge Cafe, but it grew into something a lot larger. And I'm now sort of researching and writing and teaching something I call conversational leadership. And it's that I'd like to introduce you to this afternoon. In 30 minutes, I can't go into great depth. The idea of this presentation is to kindle some interest rather than fill your minds full of stuff. And this is pretty much well represented by this wonderful quotation from Plutarch. And I think it's it's a quote that we should keep in mind. I think especially when we're educating children, we try far too often to fill people's heads with stuff rather than kindling a fire. So everything I talk about this afternoon is in my book, and I call it a book. It's not a typo. It's a cross between a blog and an online book, hence book. It's more than just a book in some ways, because it's got a lot of resources, it's got videos, it's got quotations, it's got book reviews, it's got profiles of people. It's because it's not just about me, because today there are so many, I know, there's so many wonderful people in the world developing so many incredibly useful ideas that you know, it's impossible just to claim something to be your own. So this book is as much about other people as it is me. And this is one of my knowledge cafes from a few years ago. And if we were doing this face to face, it might be working a little bit more like this. But anyway, the point is, if you want to learn more, go into greater depth into what I've got to say, this is the place to go and look. Conversationalleadership.net. Okay, so let's get into the meat of the presentation, if you like. And I want to, well, let's step back a little bit. When I was first starting to write the book and starting to think about conversation and the importance and the power and the centrality of conversation in our lives, you know, I think all of us would agree, you know, conversation is pretty central. The ability to communicate better is extremely important. But there was something nagging in my head, basically sort of intuition saying that no, conversation really is fundamental, that it's far more powerful than we ever realize. And for a little while, it took me a little while, at least for me, for the penny to drop as to what was going on. And I just want to take you through a little bit of my thinking, if you like, a little bit of the background as to why I think both conversation and leadership are important. And it all boils down to the complexity of the world today. So I've got six slides here that I want to run through quite quickly, because I'm just really creating a framework for something I think most of you are probably already pretty familiar with. A lot of it boils down to the fact that the world, you know, has changed phenomenally in the last 75 years. I mean, I'm 72 years old. I'm a baby boomer, born just after the end of the Second World War. If I think about the change I've seen in my lifetime, and many of you have seen in your lifetime, it is, you know, it is really unprecedented change. So let's just take you through these slides. I mean, the first point to make is that the world, I hope we all pretty much agree, the world is a bit of a mess. There's a lot of argument that says the world's a better place to live than it's ever been. And I think there's a lot in that. But when it comes to sort of existential threats, whether it's global warming, whether it's you know, plastification of the oceans, there's so many threats to our modern world. You know, at all levels, whether it's personal, family, business, societal, global. I think whatever we agreed on here, because I don't want to go into this in any depth, is that I hope we would all agree that the world could be a far, far better place than it is right now. And it's a big part of who I am today, and a big part of what I'm looking to do in my own small way is to help create a better world. So that's the very first point to make. I was talking about the world changing in 75 years, and if I look back over my 72 years, the one thing that I've seen is the way the world has become, you know, hyper-connected. And I'm not just talking about the internet and the digital economy and now, you know, the global financial system. If we think about our supply chains and distribution channels, you know, so much of our goods are manufactured in China. Most of our food doesn't come locally. We have this vast network, digital network, and atomic network, if you will, connecting our world. But again, as I say, to create a very different place to what it was 75 years ago. And those of you who know a little bit about complexity, and I'm certainly no expert, you will know that with connectivity comes complexity. And you may well have come across this acronym from the American military, VUCA. They say it's a VUCA world. It's volatile, it's unpredictable, it's complex, confusing, and ambiguous. And I think those adjectives sum up the modern world. And As I say, the science of complexity is really quite a deep and broad one. But the key thing I think to understand about complexity is that a complex system is not the same as a complicated system. So a Airbus A380 is complicated. You can take it apart. You can put it back together again. A bunch of experts can understand it. A global economy, that's a very different animal. And it's understanding the difference between those two is I think the key to understanding complexity or appreciating complexity. And with complexity comes unpredictability. In a complex system, you can never accurately predict the consequences of your actions. The world becomes inherently unpredictable. And so we're always going to have to live with unintended and unforeseen consequences of really anything that we do. I'm sure the early pioneers in this country, I guess back in the age of the Industrial Revolution, the 18th and 19th centuries, building steam engines and what have you, never thought for 1 minute of the consequences of carbon dioxide on the atmosphere. So the world is far more complex than it ever was. Something that hasn't changed in some ways is as human beings, and it's the one thing to remember here is that we are immensely complex as well. Our human bodies, our brains, the neurons in our minds. We're probably the most complex systems in the universe, at least as far as we know right now. And the way that we interact, our societies, our social interaction is also complex. I'm sure some of you will be familiar with the work of Dave Snowden on complexity, and he calls this anthro-complexity. He's starting increasingly to write more and more about it, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of his insights on the topic. And then just to add more to that complexity, the way we interact. So we're complex, the way we interact with each other is complex, and then the way we interact with our technical systems, which are also complex. So we built a world that is way beyond anything that one human being is ever going to be capable of understanding. So we're complex. And I think with this, and especially the unpredictability of the world, and the fact that we're still trying, I think many of us are still trying to plan and control things in traditional ways that no longer really work. And fundamentally here, we don't understand the world, we don't understand ourselves, we don't understand our psychology, our biases, and our limitations. And for those of you who stick around for my second session this afternoon, I'm going to be talking more about us and our biases and our limitations, because that's something that we need to better understand and get our head around. So all of this leads to, I think, well, the mess that we're in, and in many ways we're heading in the wrong direction right now. Okay, so that's sort of like the background introduction to this. And what I want to do now is take a look at conversational leadership, as I see conversational leadership as not a solution, as not a magic bullet, not something that overnight, with a wave of a magic wand, we can solve all of this, but a tool, if you like, or a mindset, a way of thinking about the world at an individual level that hopefully can help move us in a more productive direction. Okay, so let's look at this. So this is my definition of conversational leadership. I'm one of these people who loves to have clear, crisp definitions of things, even when they don't say a great deal, because you can't. It's like trying to capture KM, knowledge management, in a sentence or two. You can't really do it, and it's the same with conversational leadership. But I'm saying here, it's appreciating the power of conversation and recognizing that each and every one of us can lead, can practice leadership, and adopt a much more conversational approach to the way in which we live and work together. Yeah, because this isn't just about business for me. This is about our personal lives it's about society. Okay, so and this definition changes about once every 6 months, and I'm sure it'll change again sometime soon. But this kind of captures the essence of it. In my book, I talk about 5 behaviors or 5 principles. I'm not going to look at all of them right now. What I particularly want to do is, what I really want to do is take the term conversational leadership and look at the conversation piece and look at the leadership piece and explain what I mean by those 2 terms in this context. I hope that makes sense. So, what is leadership or why leadership?
Die Frage war jetzt, also ich hatte jetzt zum Beispiel was eingegeben, aber wir als Gruppe sehen nicht, wir teilen das nicht, sondern jeder macht es sozusagen Kärtchen für sich. Und ihr als Ersteller.
I'll carry on. Sharing system audio pause.
Sorry for that, David. Just proceed. Sorry.
Okay, just proceed. Okay, no problem. We often think of leadership as a position of authority, you know, so our company leaders, our organizational leaders, our societal leaders, they are leaders and they're there in the position of authority. But what I think in a complex world, so the world becomes more complex. You know, one leader, one so-called leader, hasn't the ability to understand the totality of what's going on. It's too much, it's too complex. And so each and every one of us, if you like, needs to step forward and lead, practice leadership. So what I'm saying when I talk about leadership in the context of conversational leadership, I'm saying we need to see leadership as a practice, not as a position of authority. And the key message here is that we can all, each and every one of us, can choose, maybe not necessarily to be a leader in that traditional sense, but we can choose to practice leadership. This is key. And I hope many of you familiar with the work of Stephen Covey. I discovered his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, back in 1989. And it's always guided me in so much of my thinking. In the industrial age, leadership was a position. In the knowledge age, leadership is a choice. Now, this gentleman, Ron Heifetz at Harvard, has spent his whole lifetime studying and teaching about leadership. And what I've got here I want to share with you is just a short video clip from a talk of his. It's only about maybe a minute, 2 minutes long, but for me, it really does sum up very eloquently what he means by leadership and what I mean by leadership. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So let's listen to Ron and hear what he's got to say.
Distinguishing leadership from authority helps us begin to see that if we understand leadership as a practice, as an activity, then it becomes available to anybody, high or low, any place they're positioned, simply because they passionately care about some problem situation, about the people in that problem situation, and then mobilize people with faith in their capacity to step up to the plate and meet that challenge.
I like some of the words there. He talks about passionately caring about something. That's as someone who practices leadership, passionately cares about an issue and takes responsibility and steps forward. I just clipped these few words from his talk. And again, this is key. We own, each and every one of us, own collective responsibility for the global conditions that we impact and that impact us. Yeah, and we would not make the changes we'd like to see based on authority, but rather each and every one of us taking a leadership role, each and every one of us practicing leadership, in my words. So this is what I mean when I talk about leadership. And Stephen Covey again. Most people think of leadership as a position and therefore don't see themselves as leaders. I mean, he was writing about this, as I say, 30 years ago. Now, the word conversation. Why conversation? And again, it comes back to, well, I said earlier that conversation, you know, in itself is a pretty powerful tool. It pretty much separates us from other primates and you know, the rest of the animal kingdom. But in a complex world, what do we need to do? What's the most important things we need to do if we're looking to create a better world in the complexity in which we live? Well, first and foremost, we need to make better sense of the world. You know, before we can make decisions and make plans and what have you, we need to understand what's going on. We need to make better sense of things. So that's the first thing. We also need to improve our decision making and strategizing, and clearly we can do that better if we made sense of things first. And then when we've figured out what we need to do, we need to improve our ability to influence other people and, you know, develop agency, develop the ability to act. I've seen definitions of knowledge as being the ability to act. And then, of course, we need to figure out how to better live and work together. But think about those four points there, and maybe more. How do we achieve all of that? Fundamentally, how do we achieve it? We do all of that through conversation. That's the tool that drives all of this. And this is taking me back to my KM, my sort of pure KM roots. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Clutter Manifesto. Many of you will be familiar with the work of David Weinberger. Go Google him. He's a fascinating guy and a brilliant thinker. And this quote is from 20 years ago. I'm just going to take you through it because I've always loved this quote. He says, "For all our knowledge, we don't have a clue what we're talking about. We don't understand what's going on in our business, our market, or our world." This was always key for me, that knowledge management shouldn't be about helping us to know more, which too often it is. It should be about helping us to understand better. So knowledge management should be about helping us better understand the world. And then he said in the book, you know, how do we do that? How do we understand things? And he says it's through the stories that we tell that we understand how the world works. Through the stories, through the anecdotes, through the conversations that we have. That's how we figure out how the world works. Yeah. So I rather like that quote. And this lady, if there was one little short video clip, and this video clip's only 2 minutes long, that kind of summed up for me at least a central piece of the jigsaw around what conversational leadership is about. It's what Patricia Shaw has to say here. And she co-founded the Complexity Management Center at the University of Hertfordshire in this country, along with a guy called Rav Stacey, both working in the field of complexity. But just listen to what Patricia has to say in this short video clip.
I thought last night about how am I beginning myself to think about leadership, and at least an aspect of it, and if I take it away from leaders, and I would say, what is the work of leadership? What is a way of thinking about it? And I have several formulations that I wrote down last night. For a long time, I've been saying, I think one of the ways of thinking about leadership is thinking about convening conversations that might not happen otherwise. You could also say the work of leadership is about opening spaces for reflective inquiry in the midst of our institutional life, having the courage to do that. I might also think of leadership as taking action visibly. I think one of the things that's most demanding about leadership is that it is about taking up a voice, speaking out, saying and doing things when the consequences of that will always ripple out in ways beyond what you can ever know when you do it. And nevertheless, you have to take the risk, make the judgment, try it.
Now, I must have watched this video clip 40 or 50 times by now, but it never fails to have an impact on me. It never fails to impress me. There's so much there to unpack. But the key piece there, the one message that I think stands out more than anything is this. And that's one of the ways of thinking about leadership, is thinking about convening conversations that might not happen otherwise. Now, if you take one thing away from this presentation of mine, it could be this. Stop and think about the conversations that maybe you should be having that you're not having. The conversations that maybe you're a little fearful about having, but conversations that where you are really the only one in a position to convene them. And I say that could be within your organization, it could be within your family, it could be within your local community. Just stop and think about that. I'm just going to pause for a moment and just say, right, just think about what conversation should you be having that you're not having. And to me, stepping forward and having that conversation is the essence of conversational leadership. Okay? So I'm drawing a little bit to the end here, and we can take some questions. I'm still developing this concept, and I've got a few good colleagues who are working with me. Some of you might be familiar with the work of John Hovell, who's based in the States, and there's a few others. This is something that's emerging. We're just seeing the power of conversation, recognizing it, and in some ways, so much of what I'm saying is not actually terribly new. We're pulling this stuff together in a sort of a different sort of framework. But if you're interested in what I've had to say, there's a few more things to keep in mind, because I think people misunderstand sometimes what it is. So this isn't for senior managers and executives. It isn't some new way of managing or communicating. It's for everyone. It's not an organizational development or human resources or change initiative that's going to be imposed on people. It comes back to what Kavi was saying. It's something that we can all choose to do as individuals. It's more a mindset, a set of behaviors. It's again, recognizing that we're all leaders, recognizing the power of conversation. That's a mindset, that's a set of behaviors. And the wonderful thing about it, it doesn't require any permission to start to do it right now, okay? And as I said many, many times, it's not just about our organizational life. Much last slide. If you want to learn a lot more, the best place to look is my book. Everything I've talked about, I've gone into a lot more depth in my book. It's work in progress. I'm working out loud. Having worked in the knowledge management field, it would be wrong of me not to work out loud. A lot of it's reasonably solid, but the pages and things that are under development that I'm in the process of writing and editing, are kind of, you need to register what I'm saying to access certain parts of the book. So if you're really interested, go register, and you can also go on a mailing list, and I'll keep you updated as to further developments. And then there's a whole list of other things here that you might be interested in. But that's the essence of what this is all about. And that is the end of my chalk and talk presentation, and pretty much kept to time there. So hand you back to Manfred.
Excellent, David. You're just to the point by the second, and it's amazing. Probably not by chance, but as a consequence of very, very long practice. I really appreciate your sharing the insights on conversations and leadership and these different dimensions that so well connect to each other. We had already a few conversations in our track, and one of the good practices was to raise the hand to start interaction. So this is the time right now, and please use our time. We have 15 minutes. Those of you who would like to interact, please raise your hand. And in the meantime, we had no real long chat protocol. People essentially seem to like what you were talking about, but there is no particular question right now. So ladies and gentlemen, my dear friends of knowledge management, use the time right now. In the meantime, I would like to come back to your conversation issue. David, how would you start a conversation with people who are probably who not really are open to your problems, but are in opposition and fight probably? Yeah, probably this is leading to our later conversation. But how can we do that? Not so popular discussions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because being on a friendly basis, like the two of us, it's easy, right? But how about conflicting or competing interests? How do we do that kind of interaction?
We'll be talking about in 15 minutes time. So-called impossible conversations. You know, I mean, today with the polarization of society, you know, we've got people on opposite ends of a lot of major issues, and people would probably rather kill each other than have a conversation.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot of interesting people doing interesting work in this area. Okay, I'm talking a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about in 15 minutes. But one of the things I've been working with a friend called David Krillman in Toronto, and we've put together something that we call a conversation covenant.
Okay.
It's a simple set of rules. I mean, it sounds a little bit formal, and it doesn't need to be that formal. It's a simple set of rules to create psychological safety. What we're saying is we want to create a container, if you will, in which people can have a conversation in which they feel safe. They don't feel as if the other person is maybe not acting in good faith, or the other person is going to get emotional or launch ad hominem attacks, that people are going to keep anything said in confidence. So we've got a small set of rules, and we're basically saying, you know, if you're a larger group and you're coming together to have a difficult conversation, so-called impossible conversation, that you need to agree to abide by some rules. And I say we call it a conversation covenant, but it could just be called a conversation agreement.
Okay.
And that's one way of going about it. But there are other issues as well.
David, you were talking about leadership in the beginning of this, or the first part of this conversation. The leadership issue, you said, is something anybody can claim, right? Do you think there is a kind of bottleneck in that kind of willingness or ability to take leadership, or where is the problem here?
A few times when I've spoken about conversational leadership in the past at conferences, I've always had at least one or two people come up to me and thank me and say, David, I had never realized that I could step forward and lead. They've never seen leadership in that light. So at least for some people, it's simply that they've never thought of it, which seems kind of crazy. But given that, I mean, the one thing I've learned with maybe wisdom or whatever ways over the years is that as human beings, we're all very, very different, and that there are lots of different reasons why we do and why we don't do things. I think that's part of it, is that people they just don't realize that it's not that difficult to do. And okay, you're not going to try to step forward and lead in an area you've got no expertise or no passion. So it comes back to what Ron Heifetz said. He talked about people caring and having passion. So if there's an issue, if there's something that you care about, you care passionately about, then damn it, step forward and do something about it. And again, it hasn't got to be earth-shattering, you know, and yes, you've probably got to be a little bit political and a little bit diplomatic if you're looking to change things. But each and every one of us has some power to do something. And to me, that's the essence of it.
Okay. I still would like to invite our audience to take the opportunity. Probably I just can't see it because of my own stupidity. But, I really tried to see and include everybody.
There's Peter, Rainer, at least Manfred, I can see them. Peter was one of the first, and Antje is also raising their hand.
Thank you. So
maybe later me also. Okay.
Okay. Peter.
Peter.
Yeah. All right. Hey, David, nice to see you again.
Yeah.
I got two questions, two elements, because I nearly finished it writing in the chat. One is about how we can train these skills, because we have business schools teaching management and professors undertaking studies in leadership, and so. But I think at this young age of students, it's not the right time to. Well, it's maybe too young to understand and to even to be able to practice this. So how can we teach? How we can train this kind of leadership? And the second is about the promotion in organizations. I believe that most people are promoted based on their subject knowledge, subject matter knowledge, and their experiences, but not really about the skills you have mentioned in your. So how we can enable or incentivize organization to rethink maybe their idea of who should become a manager, which is currently mostly based on this subject matter knowledge. That's two questions. Thank you.
Okay. Those are two very good questions, which speakers usually say that when they don't particularly have good answers, and I'm probably no exception in that sense. Younger people, how do we teach this? There is some work going on already. I don't know whether you have the same word in German, but very recently I came across the word oracy. In schools we talk about literacy and numeracy. We talk about reading and writing skills and numerical skills as being fundamental and being important. Yes, we never talk about conversational skills, listening skills, and speaking skills. That's oracy. Oracy is the ability to hold good conversations, if you will. And the word was made up, I think, in about 1969. So only about 50 years ago, somebody realized that, an educator realized that, and coined the word oracy to kind of missing piece of that jigsaw. And certainly I discovered in the UK, if you go to my blog, I've got a page on it, and I've found several videos of work going on in the UK in schools where they're teaching children oracy. They seem to be doing some good work, although they seem to be teaching them more about debate rather than dialogue. But they are teaching them how to have conversations, and that's a good start. So I'd like to see more of that. And I think again in the UK there has been some work going on too. But I know there was a government body looking into oracy and how that could be taught in schools. So there's a little bit going on there, but I wouldn't underestimate the challenge. And then in our organizations, people get promoted on. Well, it's the usual issue, isn't it? The best salesman gets promoted as sales manager, and of course that's not what they're skilled at. The best sales manager the best salesperson should be selling, and the best person who has the ability to manage salespeople should be promoted. Now how you can change things in organizations so that the senior managers in the organizations who got to the top in a traditional way to take conversation more seriously, I'm not so sure, but I think the key to this is the fact that anybody can practice it at any level. So if you're a team leader or a project leader or department head, you don't need any permission. And you can do this without people even realizing that you're doing it, by just taking a more conversational approach to the way that you manage your people and the way that you work. People after a while might notice that you're doing something different. But by and large, no one's going to stop you doing it. No one's going to say, Peter, you're having far too many conversations. Stop doing this. Especially if you're more productive or more effective because of it. But how you get those people at the top to see it, I don't have the magic wand to answer that one. Do you have any thoughts of your own?
Well, I just as you said at the end now, I remember that there was one organization where they get rid of, where they laid off basically a person, and it turned out that this person was acting informally as a gatekeeper, as a kind of knowledge broker, and afterwards certain things slowed down and some misunderstanding emerged. So we might be able to figure out this kind of studies and have a look at those.
Indeed, yeah.
So I have on Rainer on the list of raised hands. Number one, Rainer, probably you.
Yeah, hi David. Thanks for your introduction to conversational leadership. You also mentioned Covey, and something that I learned from Steve Covey is the difference between important versus urgent.
Yes.
And conversations take time, but they are worth it. We all agree here. But during times of disruption and crisis, there are many managers, not the leaders, the managers, who feel an urgency to manage and take back control and stop wasting time. What would you tell these kind of traditional managers?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. A lot of people see conversation as a waste of time. I mean, I think with traditional managers, I mean, the first thing for them to recognize is the fact that they take the time to have conversations and listen to people doesn't mean that they're abdicating responsibility for, at the end of the day, making decisions. You know, that's still their job to do. It's just that they have taken the time to have the conversations and listen, and hopefully they will make, you know, more informed decisions. It comes back to that sense making. If they listen to them, because if they got a team there and they listen to them, and get to, but again, better understand, you know, the business issue, the business environment, the competitors, or what have you, they're far more likely to make a better decision. But that's still their responsibility. You know, it takes a little bit of extra time. And there's something there that, I know, it's again, Stephen Covey says it, about, he talks about somebody chopping down a tree with an axe. And the guy says, why don't you sharpen the saw? It's the seventh habit, isn't it? Why don't you sharpen the saw? I don't have time. I'm far too busy cutting down this damn tree. Now, again, whether you can convince traditional managers of that is another matter, but that's the logic.
Kai, you are next on the list.
Okay, hello.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully you can see me. Great talk. I liked it a lot. I have a point because it's very interesting. I was part of an experiment in an organization which, turned now out to be very similar with what you just explained to us. It was like after a workshop where they talked about what to do, what are the actions to do next. And we decided together with the general manager who was part in the workshop to just handle over it to the group and try to find out who takes over responsibility for the actions and just give it back to the group. And it was very interesting because it turned out to be different persons than expected who took over responsibility for actions. And it turned out that it was a very fast approach, because even within a 1 hour session, it was clarified what to do, what could be the next steps. And the manager directly said, okay, go for it. And after several weeks, it was just done. It was a very, very fast approach. So I really would support the idea of just giving the opportunity for people to take over responsibility and to mobilize what they are able to do.
I really like that.
It was very interesting for me because it was just like the idea at the beginning. We said, okay, let's test it. And the manager was very open to it because they had a mind shift in like the traditional approach of just delegating task was not working anymore. And they said, we need kind of more agile approach and we need to make it handled and it should be done. And so they said, okay, let's try it. And it worked very well.
I'm sure all of us have experienced having something delegated to us that we don't really want to do.
Yeah, nobody likes to
care about it. But our friend next to us, you know, really wishes that they could get to do that, because again, it comes back to Ron Heifetz. You're talking about caring and passion. Yeah, we need
exactly. And as I said, A second thing I want to add about your brainstorming what leadership is, and I have a nice sentence from a colleague in the University of Leipzig, and he claimed another sentence which I haven't heard to you, and he said leadership is the ability to generate followers.
Yeah.
Because and I like this idea and the combination with your idea that it's not a one-way thing. Yeah, maybe there are people who like to take over responsibility, but maybe there are on the other side people who not like to be taken over by this person. You know what I mean? So there's one skill, and this is an additive to what Peter said. There's a kind of skill or a kind of characteristic of some person that people like to follow them. And this is a thing I want to add just as an idea to add it to the list of things.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we can be both leaders and followers. We can
exactly
follow certain people who've got maybe skills and passions that we don't have, but we are supportive of what they're doing. And then we've got skills and passions, and other people choose to follow us. And so you get something that's I'm forgetting the gentleman's name now, the Canadian management consultant, Henry Mintzberg.
Yes, Mintzberg.
He calls it communityship.
Yes.
Which is again a strange sort of word, but he's trying to capture that essence where everybody's a leader and a follower. It's a community. It's a community.
We have another raised hand, which is Antje. Antje, if you open your mic, then this is your chance.
Yeah, great. David, thank you. Truly inspiring, your presentation and your thoughts. My thoughts are getting back to your approach, whether this is actually applicable to all cultures. You talked at the beginning when you talked about the knowledge cafes, that you have actually conducted those all over the world. I just wonder, is it applicable to any culture?
What I learned, I mean, I didn't get a huge amount of experience in all cultures, but the cultures that were maybe the more difficult or more challenging, should I say, would be, say, Southeast Asian cultures, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, because people in those cultures are less likely to speak up. There was one key thing I learned here in the cafes that I think is important. If I put 3 or 4 people at a table to have a conversation in their own language, where there wasn't a senior manager in the room at that table, they would have, regardless of the culture really, they would have a great conversation. Yeah. And especially in, say, Southeast Asia. But what would happen in Southeast Asia, as soon as I bring people together in a circle or in a larger group, or if the people at the table are more than, say, 3 or 4, you've got a larger group, then the conversation dies because people now are more afraid of speaking up and speaking their minds. And if you have a manager in the room, you will kill the conversation stone dead. And I experienced that many times, and that's just part of their culture. So, in terms of my knowledge cafes, in cultures like that, I'm just very wary as to exactly who's in the room and how I set things up. And in fact, for me, the real value in my knowledge cafes is the small group conversations where you've got 2 or 3 or 4 people together having the conversation, bringing everyone together. It's rarely any longer a conversation. It's a series of report outs. It's people reporting back. It's a series of monologues. It's no longer a conversation. Yeah.
David.
Thank you. Definitely helpful for me.
Okay.
David, we have 4:05 our time, and you are about to talk to us in 10 minutes in a different room. So I wouldn't do a formal closure right here, but invite all of you to change to the other room, probably take some bio breaks or whatever. And I have to just brutally intervene here. We have to change for technical reason to the other room. I copy pasted the link into our chat, or you find the link in our session board, of course. And I hope to see you in a few minutes in the other room. And David, thank you so much, and see you very, very soon, okay? In the other room.
Yep.
Hope to see all the others as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.